try, like, my brother treats cancer for a living. You want grim stories of capitalism.
This is a real hard left turn you're making here, Colin.
I'm just saying, we're talking about scummy behaviors in industry.
Yeah, I wouldn't put them on the same level there, but you got a link.
I will in a second.
Okay.
Yeah,
but yeah, I love that game. The other game I like a lot that my son and I will play occasionally. I like Undaunted a lot.
Undaunted's great.
But I also like Quartermaster General, which is like
there we go.
A more historically somewhat accurate Risk, but without like Risk's playing time is just too fucking long.
Jesus, Risk setup.
By the way, I deactivated my Facebook, so I will not be posting podcasts to Facebook anymore.
That's fine. I just got to figure out where the link is.
Yeah, I just put the link.
No. I mean, if you're not figure out my login,
right? I mean, it's fine. I don't think we've had much engagement on Facebook in recent days.
We're probably falling off the radar with how little we're podcasting anyway, but that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so we're 217. Is a 217 number accurate?
Yarp.
All right, you guys ready to do this?
Give me 1 second. I'm posting on on Twitter. Hey, don't you give me any mouth.
Game last night was fun. It was really crowded.
That's good.
Good. Yeah. I mean, it was Saturday night, which helps. And also Raw's there on Monday. We're actually going to Raw on Monday. So all the wrestlers were around and they were playing wrestling songs.
Like capacity or crowded for a modern Sharks game, considering?
No, it wasn't completely full, but it was pretty close. Like there were butts and seats for sure.
I mean, as long as there were like ignorant, loud, violent assholes in 215, then it's a Shark Tank game.
It was very loud. 215 isn't the spot for that anymore, though. Ever since they put the luxuries, ever since they put the VIP area on the other side of the behind the first home area.
Shit.
They sort of rearranged a lot of that stuff. So like the fan sections are not quite the same as they were before.
When did they do that?
Well, plus the announcers are now in 215 too.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah. The take hasn't really changed much, but they took away a whole bunch of seats up top and they took away a bunch of seats at the bottom or in bottom of 215. So it's a different thing. But it was, you still got the "You Suck" chant. You got I'll get into the hockey stick thing. You ready to go, Ben?
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Hold on. Sip some coffee.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
Old fashioned.
Colin, you should definitely have some coffee at this time of night, right?
No, I'm sipping my old fashioned.
Load up. All right. Hello and welcome to Circling the Cup, San Jose Sharks podcast, episode number 217. And folks, let me tell you, I went to the game last night and I had a beer out of a hockey stick, and oh, it was glorious. And we're going to talk about the amazing element of the hockey stick beer and the probably should have really thought about that, especially the tank element of the hockey stick beer. I'm Alex. Here with me, as always, is the Honorable Ben. What's up, Ben?
Are you sure you weren't just tripping balls?
Ooh, tough to say with all the hockey stick beers, Ben. I got to be honest with you. And of course, drinking a late night coffee in Sweden. In fact, actually, Colin, I think you may be the next Sharks pickup because they seem to love their Swedes. It's Colin. What's up, Colin?
No, I'm not drinking a coffee.
You're going to be part of the Swedish Sharks Mafia here in a bit. So, want to talk about there's lots to talk about this week, but one thing I kind of want to get into real quick because it's silly but also fun. Went to the Sharks game last night. I've been to a couple of Sharks games this season. One thing that I had never done that I'd always wanted to do was get one of the hockey stick of beers. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically a large plastic hockey stick with a teal blade, and they put beer in it. It sounds really simple. Now, I assumed this was going to be made of the cheapest plastic ever. As it turns out, it's very strong and very durable. And listener Alex, who is chatting right now on the YouTube, he was there and he went home and he measured the amount of beer that goes into it. It's about 1.5 pints, which is a good amount of beer. Now, here's the fun thing. drinking beer out of a hockey stick is hilarious. And again, it's a good quality hockey stick that you're going to keep, and you're going to drink more beers out of at home, or you can even play, floor hockey with if you really want to. But here's the con, Colin and Ben. It's long, and it doesn't really fit with how you have to drink it. You have to kind of drink it by tilting it all the way up. So fortunately for us, there was no one in front of us, because if there was, there would be no physical way to actually drink that without standing up. And one of the things that made it so fun and hilarious was, obviously the Jumbotron comes on, right? And there were frequent episodes of like two people having to stand up and chug their hockey stick beers, and then they would flash a Sharky Says Drink Responsibly button at the bottom of the screen, which was good. But again, like, the Sharks talk a lot about the things that they do every offseason to kind of up the fan experience. And I'll have to be perfectly honest with you. I haven't loved the fan experience really since we kind of lost Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll, part two. Now I understand why that occurred, and I'm not saying anything about it, but one of the things that sort of fell off in the last several years of Sharks hockey to me live were some of those little traditions that really unified the audience. Again, that goal song in particular, I understand why it's gone, but the entire arena did the same movement at the same time. There was just something about it. There was something about the old school giant paper Sharks teeth in the Cow Palace days that they used to give before people did the hand chomp. It was really special. And so the Sharks have kind of lost bits and pieces of that. And I would say that, while there are still some things that are really cool, the hockey stick beer, and seeing how many people had them and how much they were enjoying them was just really cool. And that's just that. They also have the pouches. They've got like little fake sweater jersey pouch necklaces that have cocktails in them. That's a little too aggressive for me. I'm not drinking a cocktail at a hockey game. That's just me. But it was kind of fun. And then the other thing I'll point out too is the tank now has a lot of really exclusive merchandise, as is the Pro Shop. Yeah, it's overpriced. I was able to score a Smith shirt and a Celebrini shirt, which was cool, which those you can get anywhere. But just in general, like the store experience is there too. They've got a lot of really cool, really unique stuff. A lot of it's really retro. There's a lot of starter stuff up there.
So when did you go to the store? Because my problem with the few times I've been to the tank in the last 15 years,
it's tiny.
My problem is always the crowd. Like I've never been able to like get in there to like buy something during the game.
It's one of the smaller stores and hockey arenas that I've been to still. That hasn't changed, but they have a lot more kiosks, and each kiosk has its own set of merchandise, and each one of that is more or less fairly exclusive, not completely exclusive. So just in general, like the merch is getting a lot better. There were a lot of awesome. I mean, it was very hard not to walk out of there with like a Celebrini like framed number print in glass, you know what I mean? And like all sorts of stuff. So that stuff's getting a lot better. And the game last night that we went to, which was the Wild game, it had a really, really good crowd. It was pretty crowded. It wasn't like completely full, but it felt like it was near full. It was real loud. And obviously the Sharks right now to watch, regardless of the fact that they're constantly losing, they're really fun. And so, it was a good time had by all. Now, I want to pivot this for a second here into the thing that seems to be one of the biggest topics of the week, and really maybe of the season is Will Smith, right? So we had a lot of conversations about Will Smith in the very beginning when they were trying to plug him directly as like the third line center, right off the bat, because that's his natural position. And we talked a lot about how it seemed like, his confidence wasn't fully there. Obviously, it's a big adjustment to go from NCAA to NHL. The comparisons to Celebrini are always a little unfair just because, obviously the Sharks have marketed these two guys together as a package to a large extent. But in reality, Celebrini is just a phenomenal guy off the bat. He's a special player. And Will Smith looks to be a very good player, but he's probably on more of a regular development path, which is not a bad thing. Again, it's like if you take Joe Thornton, you pair him next to Gretzky, as good as Joe Thornton is, Gretzky's going to outshine him in that, right? And so, but Smith lately, he has, he's had a couple of games on and off here and there for development, which the Sharks made very clear was part of his development plan. At the same time, he's had a couple of outings here where he has made a bad turnover, and then he's seen his minutes reduced, or in one situation, completely sat. for a game. And this is a real hot topic. If you go, online to the Sharks Reddit, if you go into any of the communities, Facebook pages, whatever, there are fans that are kind of all over the map. You got the fans that are saying he's not ready, put him in the AHL. You have fans that say he's not necessarily immediately ready, but keep him in the NHL. And then you have fans that are like super pissed and think that Warsofsky is, jacking up his development by, reducing his minutes.
Nah.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because in last night's game against Minnesota, and I didn't even realize this while I was at the game, he got his minutes reduced in starting the second period, correct, Ben?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So now, granted, there's always like a little bit of a difference in perspective, I think, of like the in-person and the TV. Obviously, TV, you're seeing angles that you're not seeing in the stands, and in the stands you're seeing angles and off the play stuff that you're typically not catching in TV, even when they play a replay. And I'll say this, last night in particular, I thought Smith was looking fairly good in the plays that I saw him in person. He was making a lot of plays. He was really aggressive in areas, and he had a lot of great attempts. I will say that there were a couple of times that he made some real bad, cost you a game turnovers. And this is something that he's kind of, again, young, new player, getting better every game, I think. But he's still making those mistakes. So I want to get your guys' take here in terms of what you think is what you think is going on, and also what you think would maybe be, if that's not the correct thing, what you think the correct thing would be for his development.
I've got, so maybe a spicy take, but like especially over the holiday break or holiday period in Sharks games, I started to develop this view that Smith's biggest problem is he doesn't respect his opponents. Like he's trying to go back to the well that was success in his past and not respecting the fact that he's no longer like top 1%. He's has the possibility to be up in top 20% of players of the league, but he constantly seems to make these plays that, like, if I'm being hypercritical, look lazy, but they look like he doesn't expect people to like defend passing lanes. He doesn't expect a goalie to be able to have a good glove. He doesn't expect a goalie to cover their angles, and it feels like he just hasn't transitioned. He's still trying to go to those plays and those habits that did well for him in when he was playing boys. And now he doesn't have the pace, he doesn't have the aggression, he doesn't have the comfort to really take that next pace. And I think we have another Eklund on our hands. Like I think in a year or two we're just going to be like, Jesus, Smith is lights out. This is great. But I think he's disrespecting his opponents. I think he needs to really feel like he's the underdog.
So Ben, I want to throw it to you third, because I know you're going to have a lot to say on this. And so Colin, I think one thing to point out is that's him doing that at his age is totally fair, right? Because again, sure. He's an average player. I don't want to say he's above average. He's above average player, but it's just average in the sense of like a regular good player, right? There's going to be an adjustment. I think for me, I don't necessarily know. I get what you mean by disrespect there. What I feel like I've seen is two different things. One of which I think he's pulled out of, which I think is good, and that was my initial sort of gripe, if you will, about how the Sharks were utilizing him, which essentially was in the beginning of the season. And again, this is a faster, stronger game. He looked hesitant at times. He looked like he didn't really trust his own confidence and stuff like that. And so he would hesitate just a hair. And in this league, those hesitations were kind of, starting to pull him out of position. He just basically be behind the plate because of that. Not because I don't think he saw things, but because I think, maybe he was intimidated to some degree or doubting his own decision making. To me, in watching him this season develop, I think for the most part, he's shaken that off, at least to the extent that he had it before. What I am seeing now is a player who's starting to get the hang of it, but a player who is still not yet, and again, he's developing, fully reading the game, both in terms of the opponents, to your point, Colin. I don't know that I would say disrespect, but I get what you mean by it. But also, his line mates to an extent. And this is sort of one of those things that I see pop up a lot in the complaints about Smith, which is, well, you saddle him with Kunin. Kunin sucks. Agree. Kunin sucks. I'm not going to disagree with that. At the same time, though, you want to put him in the position to succeed as much as possible, especially through his development and just in general, right? That's a good coaching strategy. But to me, it's like, well, if you've got Kunin on your line, you need to know Kunin's not going to reach that pass.
Well,
I'm serious because that to me, it's a little bit of an an on ice intelligence adjustment that needs to happen. I think when you look at a player, again, I don't want to make direct comparisons to Celebrini, but just as an example, the difference between a Celebrini level or even an Eklund, I would say at this point, is that they have built up enough intelligence or had it naturally to understand the limitations of their partners and the strengths of their partners as well, right? And I think Will Smith is still just a bit out of sync with that. Again, to your point, Colin, I think that's absolutely fixable with continued, time and playing. And I have the same expectation that you do, which is this year, I think he's doing well, especially for his age. I think he's improving, which is a really good sign. But I think he's going to be a player that needs a season or two. And then once he gets that, and he's got that, just that level of awareness is up to the level that it needs to be. The level of confidence is up to the level that it needs to be. I think he's going to be great. So I'm not worried about his larger development. I think the question floating around for a lot of people is the way the Sharks are handling him, at the end of the day, is that actually going to hamper the development, or are we making mountains out of molehills here? Ben,
I mean,
go ahead, Colin.
Okay, just to clarify on the disrespect part, if you've seen the latest nonsense coming out of Daniel Sprong in the European leagues, I'm not talking about that level of disrespect where somebody walks into a team is like, I'm only going to be here for a cup of coffee because I'm so good. No. I'm saying Smith doesn't seem to have gotten the understanding of the intensity that he needs to bring in terms of energy and maybe aggression.
I think he has energy, but again, I get where you're going, which is just he's still trying to play an NCAA game in a league that is not really the NCAA, and I think he's gotten better about that. Again, I think that's why we saw so much kind of hesitancy with him in the very beginning, because he was like, oh shit, this faster. I can't make that pass here. This guy's gonna, pick it off.
Well, it's okay. I think Celebrini has the ability to make that pass. I think he just doesn't understand the speed and
Smith, you mean?
Just power. Sorry, you're right, Smith. The speed and power that he needs to put on that shot. It's a weird comparison, but I would point to Liljegren. That little fucker is a little shot badger. Anytime he has a chance at the puck, he's just going.
Yeah.
Whereas Smith, Smith just always seems to have that little bit of not quite certain, and it just slows him down. And it's I think this time next season we're going to be quite happy.
I actually think, and we're going to kick it over to Ben. I actually think the only thing about Smith right now, I don't want to say it frustrates me, because it doesn't frustrate me. Again, I just bought a Smith shirt, so I'm all in on him. That always makes me go, is there's a lot of situations, and again, he'll get around this, where he just needs to control the puck a little better, particularly in a shooting situation. So there have been a lot of times in the last couple of games in particular where he's had a perfect opportunity to get a goal. The goalie's out of position, the puck is bouncing to him, and he's just having that little issue controlling that puck to get the good shot off the way he needs. And so, he's either late or he misses or he bobbles. Again, I think he'll work that out. Ben, I'm sure you got a lot to say on this.
So I think Colin makes two really good points. I think that the comparison to Eklund is a really good one.
Yeah.
I think Smith comes into the league kind of like Eklund did, a little undersized, a little as we've talked about, hesitant. Definitely, I don't think that hesitance has completely gone away. I think that might be playing a part in his issues handling the puck and catching the puck, to be honest, which I think has been noticeable over the last few games. And I agree with both of you. I don't think this is a long-term issue, though I do worry about the way he's kind of getting, sort of yo-yoed up and down the lineup. Like Warsawski, I don't really understand like what he's trying to do on a nightly basis with the lines.
Yeah, I think one thing I threw out on our Discord chat, and this is not necessarily based on anything, but it was more a reaction to kind of seeing fans reactions to decisions, and this is the thing that happens across sports in general is, not necessarily coaching, right? But for players, for example, like player has a split second to make a decision. Now, the difference between an elite player and a non-elite player is the decision that they make at the end of the day in that split second. When it comes to coaching, the one thing to remember, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the case, but we're not, you're not in the locker room. As much information as you get, like even the really good interviews, like I'm really glad Brody's back because he's actually putting out some really good content and giving some good backstage access. Even in there, it's entirely possible that sometimes the line that gets put out is strategic, not in a way that we understand. It's also entirely possible that, they woke up in the morning and Graf's like, hey man, I got really bad leg cramps and I need to reduce, like there's so many things that can be going on.
But it went the other way. Like they promoted Graf.
Yes.
Initially.
Graf didn't say that at all, by the way.
I know. Look, my issue is that you want to get the most out of a young player who's having some confidence issues. You've got to provide him with some consistency, I think. Like that's what I would be doing. And that's like the absolute opposite of what Warsawski does on a nightly basis. He's moving Cunnin up and down the lineup. He's moving Barclay Goodrow up and down the lineup for no good reason. Reasons
that we don't.
Bad reasons. I don't know what the reasons are inside the locker room, but the result is bad.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like that's the thing. So I don't really care. Look, I get that there could be considerations inside the locker room, and we don't get to see that. But the outcomes are bad.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously bad. And predictably bad because Goodrow and Cunnin are garbage. So to me, you had a couple of games where Graf, Celebrini, and Smith were very good together.
So fun.
And so fun. And clearly like understood where their partners were going to be. And I would say that's your best case scenario for a kid like Smith.
Yeah.
Is put him with other guys with some talent, put him with some guys where he can get comfortable. Cause that's the thing, right? He's not comfortable and it's very clear.
Yeah.
And the things that Warsawski does publicly are not going to bolster that confidence or that comfort level, right? Look, maybe there is nothing that's going to make Smith comfortable this season. He's just going to be kind of feeling his way through a very difficult situation to put a 19-year-old in. But to me, if I'm the coach, my job is to get the maximum out of the players that matter. Development-wise, etc. And the way I would do that is to give him consistency. It doesn't have to be with Celebrini. I mean, it could be Eklund, Graf, and and Smith, right? Yeah. Like he needs a center. He needs somebody who's strong at center, and he needs people who will be where he expects them to be, not a brain dead plug like Cunnin, who is never where he's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, and two things to that too. One is that I think, and it was pretty clear from the way the Sharks marketed Smith and from where they were playing him in the first quarter of the season, their expectations for Smith may be loftier than where he really is.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of what's going on. I think sometimes, especially in the beginning, they thought he was ready to anchor an NHL line. And he wasn't, and that's okay, right? But like, and they eventually adjusted him to wing, which is good. I wonder,
totally.
He clearly, there's clearly a separate set of expectations on him as a player. I don't think it's meant to be negative. I think maybe it's just Lofty, they think he starts to hit there, and then he doesn't, and then they kind of ping pong to your point, Ben. The one thing I do want to point out though, with some of the decision making that Warsofsky is making, and I'm not defending it. It's just based off of, if you're not catching all the backstage stuff and all that stuff. Brody had an interview with Warsofsky. It's a pretty good interview, I thought, as far as coach interviews go. And one of the things that he brought up that really stuck with me was that some of his logic in, and I already know what the counter is going to be, so I'll deflect that in a second. But some of the, he didn't call it Smith directly, but some of the logic with the way that he is, taking care of minutes or scratch and stuff like that has to do with, okay, are you making a mistake? That's one thing. Are you making a mistake? We've identified it. We've worked with you on it, and then you're consistently making it. That's another thing. And when you look at Smith specifically, he is kind of consistently making the same errors, at least one big error, which is that, really ill-advised turnover that has led to, a couple of critical goals against. Now, the counter to that obviously is, why don't you treat all players like that? Because he also says he doesn't discriminate. And I get it. Again, I think there's a different set of expectations. I also think, to be blunt, and I said this last night in our chat, it came up, well, why not, what about guys like Ferraro, Ruda, and Ceci? Well, what are you going to do with those guys? Because
let me one up you.
Yeah.
Real quick here. Which player has had 2 crucial turnovers in the last few games that have led to empty net goals?
Celebrini?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where's his move down the line?
Well, also, I think
okay.
The level that Celebrini brings on top of that, though, is enough for you to go, hey man, you're carrying the rest of the team here to a large extent, but let's try not to do that, which is not where Smith is.
But again, if the problem is, I feel like so a couple of weeks ago there was a lot of sort of hype about where Celebrini was, and there were some videos put out about him just basically, deking guys left and right and winning those puck battles and stuff like that. And my personal observation since then in the games I've watched is that Celebrini's moves are not working as well over the last few games. I think players are starting to key on those things, and he's not adjusting yet to that.
Right.
So there's definitely a book on Celebrini going around.
So what I'd like to see is both these guys, sort of overcome their challenges, right? Will Smith, the ill-advised pass, Celebrini trying to do his sweet moves, and the guys are actually ready for it now, in the worst possible scenarios. I mean, like, nobody can really get by Mark Stone.
Let's be real though, Ben. If Celebrini, first of all, Celebrini keeps doing it at the end, so it's tough to reduce his minutes at that point. But
no, true.
But, and I'm not saying this is an excuse. I'm just pointing this out, and I don't think the Sharks should be taking this into consideration by any means either. You like Celebrini, right?
Yeah, totally. I also like Smith.
If the Sharks, I know, but if the Sharks suddenly reduce Celebrini's minutes, are you going to fucking flip a table over?
I would.
I don't need to see.
So here's what I would say. I don't want either of the guys' minutes reduced.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
Like what I want is, these guys are creative playmakers, and they're going to make mistakes. And in some sense, you have to live with it, because if you don't, then you don't get the player that you want, right?
Well, that's what this year's all about, too. Just to add, that's what this year's all about. This is the year to allow those guys to F up and learn. Versus like two years down the line, you don't want them doing it then, because you're competing.
Correct.
Right,
so go ahead, Colin. I'm sorry.
So, like, sitting Smith is making Warsofsky skate Celebrini too much. Like, he's overshifting Celebrini when Smith is
think Celebrini is overshifting himself.
Oh, well, sure. But I mean,
I agree.
But that's Celebrini's fucking job. Like, you want the player who's like, get me out there. It's the coach's job to be like, I'm going to use you when it's right. But I actually want to hear Ben's thoughts on the other thing that Alex mentioned, how people are saying, oh, send Smith to the AHL.
Yeah, so this is again a place where I'm unclear on what the Sharks are doing or think about Smith, right? Because one option to build his confidence is to let him go destroy the AHL, right? So they could do that. I don't know why they haven't. If he's not doing what you want him to do, and if he isn't learning when you fucking put him with two terrible players, which that's not how I'd try to get him to learn, but that's how they've chosen to do it. So whatever.
Yeah.
Like, the next step has to be, to me, go build your confidence in the AHL for a bit.
I think the mistake that they are making, if they're making a mistake, is that they so desperately want him to be where he's going to be, but now that they are probably trying to throw everything at him to get that to stick.
Probably. Yeah.
And here's the one thing I will say about the AHL. In the beginning of the season, I would have said, and I think I did say a couple of times, like, maybe he should go down just for a stretch and then, dominate and come up. At this point, I don't know that I see the AHL benefiting him.
I don't either.
Even if he's getting more playing time. Right, I know. Even if he's getting more playing time. But yeah, I mean, it is a fair question. I don't think he's doing bad enough in this particular season.
No.
That at this point he needs to go down. I think he's playing well.
I don't either.
When he makes a mistake, it's a catastrophic mistake, and that's what I think they're trying to figure out. And they may be just throwing shit at a wall at this point, which is not really what you want to hear.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But that may be some of it. It may be like, hey, we've talked to you, try it. We've worked on it in practice. Yeah. Great, everything looks good. Oh shit, you get in a game scenario when you're doing it again, dude. We tried to give you the carrot. Now we need to try to give you the stick. Oh, neither's working. Uh-oh.
So, but here's my problem with it is that, again, like, you're asking him to, or expecting him to be a particular type of player, but he can't, because you're saddling him with bad guys who are never where they're supposed to be, who can't catch a pass, who can't, shoot above 4%.
But let's be clear, the player they're expecting him to be is the player who's going to be able to fit with any line and do it. And I agree with you here.
Yeah, but Celebrini can't even get Cunnin to fucking score. So come on, man.
He's not there now. And I think that's a big issue. There's a big difference between where you expect him to be and the reality of where he actually is. And that ought to affect how you're using him and what he needs. And I think, like, Warsawski, he's getting a bit of ire right now from Sharks fans, justifiably, for some of these line decisions. And again, we're not in the locker room. I would say, he's also a rookie head coach. We all talk about how we want, like, the NHL to stop using the same three guys over and over again. Okay, but you got to give a coach like Warsawski a little bit of time.
Totally.
He needs to be able to learn the season. Now, much like Smith, if we get into season 2 and season 3 and we're seeing this same struggle with both of these guys, that is much more of an issue. Now's the time to kind of, to be honest, fuck around a little bit. I know this is a really M-rated podcast today. And see, but I agree with you, Ben. I think it's frustrating, and I think, again, part of the reason why they may be bouncing him on some of those lines, again, is that misaligned expectation that, like, oh no, you're smart enough and skilled enough to be able to read this, because eventually they're going to need to spread, likely.
Totally.
These guys out. But again, is he ready for that right now? Not really, and not with those players necessarily. And that's not a knock on him. Like, those guys are regularly out of position.
Yeah, they're bad.
The only reason I can see, I mean, I know there's locker room stuff, whatever that you constantly hear, but, like, the one thing I will say about Kunin this season is he gets an inordinate amount of breakaways. I mean, he doesn't score on any of them.
I mean, not back checking will do that for a guy.
I suppose it's a numbers game, And when you look at a guy like Goodrow, who I think is terrible this season, Goodrow in the past, for every team he's been on, historically has had a habit of just ending up in the right place in the big game at the right time. Now, is that enough to keep those guys in the roster? No. Are you going to be able to get those guys off the roster before the trade deadline? Also, not really. And you're very. I think the thing that sucks is that when you look at the guys that we would like to sit or be scratched or be sent to the AHL, they're not the guys you are going to be able to or going to be willing to do that with, which sucks. But what that does mean is younger players like Smith or Graf or Cardwell or hell Gushin are the guys that are probably going to see the most movement in that regard. Because again, let's take the defense. You're not going. Forget waivers for a second. You're not going to send Ferraro, Ruda, and CC down at the same time and pull three rookies up. I know, I do too, but that's not a realistic expectation. And quite frankly, if you're the Sharks and you're hoping to trade those guys, putting them on waiver, like a guy like Ferraro, I have a funny feeling you drop Ferraro on waiver, he gets snatched by a stupid team. Ruda, I don't think so, but that's not the reality of the makeup of the team right now. And so, unfortunately, I think they're trying to keep Smith up as much as they possibly can, and they're trying to give him the opportunities as much as they can. But again, Ben, quite a bit to your point, I don't think they figured out how to get him to fully respond the way they want. And I think, I think what's difficult is if you reward him and he makes a mistake. Let's say he makes a catastrophic mistake, not small, or a couple of big mistakes or something you're trying to iron out of his game. And then and so that's not necessarily fixing it fully. And then you try to, hey, okay, I'm sure they have an open dialogue with him, but hey, you're kind of effed up here. We're going to do this, and we want you to really sit and analyze and think and come back stronger. But if that's also not working, then again, you're just kind of at that throwing shit at a wall.
But
go ahead, Colin.
First, some part of me feels like there's someone in the organization who feels like, oh, we've got the next Sidney Crosby with Celebrini, so Smith must be our Malkin. When it's dude, come on, no.
That's how the marketing.
Smith is not going to be Draisaitl. He's not going to be Malkin. That
you don't know that.
That's not who that plays. I don't think he's going to be either of those type of guys. I think Smith is going to be a good passing, shooting forward. I think Eklund is the best example. If we want to go old, shit, I don't know.
I get what you're saying. You don't think he's going to be the 2 in the 1-2 punch to the same extent. But I think he's going to be. I do think he's going to be the 2. I just don't necessarily know when and whether that level of 2 is that exact level. But much like Eklund, right? Look at Eklund, right? Eklund came in. He was fun to watch at first, right? He wasn't fully ready, wasn't sized up yet, needed to get a bit bigger. Did that, worked through the AHL, and now Eklund is great. In fact, actually, one of the things that I feel really bad about is, last night, at the Tank, I could go walk around and buy anything Celebrini I wanted. Wasn't a lot of Eklund stuff. And to me, if I, listener Alex Chu, who's on here, he bought a couple of jerseys, sweaters yesterday, one for himself and one for someone else. And, he got, Celebrini ones, which again makes sense. But for me, we were having a conversation before about which sweaters to get. And for me, there were 3 real obvious ones that will be strong sweaters to have for a long period of time, and then one on the fringe. And those 3 for me, Celebrini, obviously, Askarov, pretty obviously, Eklund, pretty obviously, and then the more fringy one is a wait and see, but likely is Smith for me. The other players on the roster, if I were to buy a sweater today, those would be the ones I have to give much more consideration to, because I don't know whether or not they're going to be, where they're going to land, or whether or not I would consider them classic Sharks. And the way that Eklund, to me, is starting to look. Eklund is a huge part of the future of this team, and he gets better consistently. So, the Sharks, I don't think the Sharks are going to end up being a team, especially with their prospect pool right now. I don't think they're going to be a Chicago in that they have to rely on a 1-2 punch specifically. I think they're going to have a lot more talent than that.
We're going to look like Minnesota in a few years. And for people who don't watch Minnesota play this season or even last season, they're fucking good.
Yeah, I was actually
even with Kaprizov out, they're good.
I was surprised the Sharks played as well as they did against them. I mean, we were leading the game, and it felt like visibly, I could be wrong, but it seemed like we were always in their zone, and it felt like we were getting constant shots off and stuff like that. And if you asked me what my expectation was going to that game, it would have been not that at all. I don't know, Ben, you were going to say something.
I think that I'm going to take the Smith conversation in a slightly different direction, but still talk about the fact that he's getting saddled with bad players. I think the main issue is that the organization thinks the bad players are better than they are.
Yes,
and
for sure.
and let me add to Exhibit A was one of our beat reporters this week laundered some of the quote unquote analytics that that it's very clear the Sharks think are important
Jesus, yeah.
because he wrote an article about all these things, and
Fuck
some
battles.
of them are excellent metrics. So successful pass rate, passes leading to shots. By the way, Smith is second on the team in that to Celebrini. Scoring chances, you'll be unsurprised to know that Luke Cunnin is high up in scoring chances because he's where he needs to be, but he doesn't have the talent to back it up. Possession time, where William Eklund is just incredible.
Mhm.
Controlled entries where Celebrini is great. Turnovers created. Okay, whatever. But here's where I figured out why they think Kostin is better than he is. So there are two stats he highlights at the end. One is called puck recoveries, one's puck battles. And Kostin is really good at the puck recoveries. Delandria, Grundstrom, Sturm, and Goodrow are the top 4 of the top 5 in puck battles won.
Which is like, what does that even fucking mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. So I look at this, and all the bad players that the Sharks continue to run out are getting credit for being very good at puck battles won. Delandria, Grundstrom, Sturm, I don't think is very good anymore, but whatever. I know you guys disagree. Goodrow.
I like
Ferraro is 8th in the league among defensemen for this so-called stat. So there's a problem here. Either this stat doesn't mean what people think it means.
Right.
It's not actually predictive of success, and the Sharks are overemphasizing it. Or it's like hits, and whoever's recording this, from arena to arena, is heavily biased. You know what I mean? Like, we often see in hockey games that the home team is credited with like twice the number of hits as the other team, no matter what happened in that game.
Yeah.
I suspect this is garbage data. Personally, I don't, and that this garbage data is leading the team to think particular players are more valuable than they are.
But you've got a good point. Like, because basically what you're describing is they're overvaluing role players. And
well, they clearly have been, exactly, right. Like, and I've always wondered, they call it leadership, right? They say, oh yeah, well, a lot of these guys we're putting out there, they've indicated they're putting out there because they bring something special to the team in terms of leadership. I also think that behind the scenes, they're looking at this stat and going, these guys are amazing. Look at them win these puck battles. and when I look at it, I go, no, that's a garbage stat. If that's saying that Delandria, Grundstrom, Sturm, and Goodrow and Ferraro are very valuable players, that stat's fucking bonkers, and you shouldn't be looking at it. That's my interpretation. So
yeah, like I invite these people who think that stat and like the role player thing is the way to go watch this latest World Juniors Championships, man. Like, Team Canada went with a bunch of role players and got fucking smoked. And USA gets the gold, so yay. But like, you roll out, if you want to carry a bunch of role players, like, you better be the lights out shutdown defense of the year. You better be like the 2012 Kings or whatever. Because like you're not going to win in modern hockey games if you don't have those creative 200-foot players.
I mean, the other possibility, and I know somewhere Baldy is going to explode when I say this. Puck battles don't matter really in aggregate. Like, whatever we classify as a puck battle is not important. What's important is, and this is maybe the bigger, what my takeaway is, what you do with the puck is what matters, right? Yeah. Somebody else, I think it was Aaron, one of our longtime followers, Tea Time Law on Twitter, made a really excellent point, which is that perhaps these guys are winning puck battles so much because they're losing the puck and creating puck battles a lot. I was like, oh shit, I think you might be right.
There was this nonsensical stat that was getting thrown around. I want to say like in like the range of 2010 to 2015, where it was hit resulting in turnover or something like that. And they were pandering that about in the playoffs, being like, oh yeah, this guy has 1.5 hits resulting in turnover per game. It's like, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this offline. You know my feelings on advanced stats. I'm always very mixed on those metrics because obviously there are some like Corsi
Yeah.
and Fenwick that I find fairly useful and a good way to quantify what's going on. And in some
And
respects,
they're predictive. That's
right,
the,
right.
Those two are predictive, which is important.
Right. And then I see all these other stats where I'm like, okay, that's great for a post story if you really want to dig that deep. But second to second in a game, and the players aren't thinking about that stat at all. Like they're not thinking about on a Tuesday, Will Smith is better at tapping in goals if he's from the left side above the faceoff. Like it's just that number overload. It's nice that we can get that data, but that data doesn't necessarily tell an accurate story, nor is it predictive. And I think that's something that the Sharks have emphasized in the last couple of seasons that they have, advanced analytics guys in their organization. Part of what I wonder when it comes to Warsofsky a little bit, and it's not just because of Warsofsky, it's because of how the organization has handled things, both under Doug Wilson and definitely under Greer, is how much of a say does the coach have in player personnel? Not lines. Lines the coach had better have the say. Yeah. But also in terms of call-ups and move downs and stuff like that, because the Sharks have in the last couple of years, in their attempt to emphasize development, brought in a lot of ex-players as development coaches, a lot of people. Those people have to be doing something, right? And one of the things that I noticed about Quinn, and this happened with Bugner a little bit too, was like when they would do the post-game interviews, and occasionally they would ask stuff about the AHL, and it was fairly clear that he wasn't really involved with the AHL side as much as you would have thought he would have been. And so the question is that an organizational? Was that just Quinn being flippant one, or not about the question? Yeah. What was it that he didn't have a vested interest in working that way, or was it that the organization was like, you worry about this and we will dictate the rest of this? Because when you see some of the calls that have been made in terms of players, and this kind of brings it full circle before we kind of switch into the scores 3 stars of the week here. One of the things that I have noticed is that you see the players we brought in and you scratch your head as the why. You see some of the players sometimes that get called up in the orders they get called up, and you scratch your head a little bit like, why? Why did it take so long to get Graf up? You know what I mean?
Well, General manager of tanking, man. Come on.
Well, yeah. Well, sure, and entirely possible as well. But I'm just curious to know like what.
I'll be honest. I'm shocked Graf is up.
I'm shocked Graf is up as well.
He deserves it.
Pleasantly surprised, but
yeah, exactly. He deserves it. He should have been up. But to me, like, this is the prime time. Let's highlight the guys we want to move time, right? So either let's be clear. Injuries have played a role in it, right?
Yes,
it's like
of course.
Dellandrea, Kostin, Kovalenko, who I like, by the way, Kovalenko. These guys keep getting hurt, so it makes sense that Graf is up, and he probably does go back down, till the trade deadline, once everybody's healthy, if they do get healthy. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think Warsofsky has any control over the roster that's handed to him on a daily basis. I really don't. I mean, he's a rookie coach. Yeah. He's got lots to learn and lots to do outside of lobbying, for, hey, could I get some talent?
I mean, he's got the team. Here's what I will say about Warsofsky. And again, he's a rookie head coach here, right? Yeah. Now some of this is the roster as well, right? But he does have the team playing more competitively. Now, some of that is because we got lucky, we got Celebrini. That's a factor in it. Sure. The players are different. And I would argue this year's roster is better than last year's roster, even if it's not particularly phenomenal. But you can't discredit the fact that like he has these guys pushing hard for the most part every game. Like, last year I would have looked at it and I would have said, we get to the third, and if they're down, the game's already over at that point. Now, are the Sharks playing a complete game now? No. Some games, sure. Not all the time, obviously. But are they getting some of the fundamentals more right than they were under Quinn? I think so. Are they showing more heart and compete? I think so. And when you see some of the behind the scenes stuff, do they seem like they're gelling a lot more in terms of like just people and personality? Yeah, I think so. So, to your point, Ben, I don't think all of these decisions are Warshawski's decisions at this point, but not to let him off the hook.
No, because I want to add on to that.
Yeah, I do agree that he needs to, when he does have control of the decision.
Yeah,
I hope that he starts to make better decisions in some of these situations.
I mean, he could be on a daily basis rolling out 2 very good lines.
Yeah,
right.
And then you just put the dross, the tryhards on your 3rd and 4th lines and go, right?
Yep.
But he never does.
I think I think it's because he wants to try to get 4 more balanced lines that have 2 superstar lines and then 2 why are we even on the ice
but
line?
That's a problem.
Yeah,
sure, because you don't have the components for it, and you have to recognize that, right? Like, look, maybe it is all part of the secret tank. Maybe running Cunnin and Goodrow out there is all part of the effort to get the number 1 overall pick again. I don't know.
Possible.
Top 5 already.
You're gonna win that bet, buddy. But to me, like, let's say it's not a secret tank, because why would it be? I mean, these guys are, as Alex says all the time, they're professionals. They don't do it. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So if you're Warshawski and you want to win some games, the solution is right in fucking front of him. But a couple of games he's done it, and then the Sharks win a game or 2. But he doesn't seem to understand. It's like the neurons are not firing. That when he then puts Cunnin on the top line and some other Costin on the second line, and they can't fucking score, the math isn't working out.
Maybe Ben, just maybe
secret tank.
No, well, no.
Not Warshawski down. No. Above him, sure, but maybe, not him down.
Maybe some of the concern with using that strategy overly consistently, and this swings back around to what Colin and you, Ben, were kind of saying a little bit about Celebrini. Maybe the issue with that is that if he does that, right, and he does it consistently, then it becomes obvious what he's doing, and then those lines just start to get overtaken because it's so telegraphed, right? So and also, to be fair, I don't think the Sharks really are confident in exactly what they have. I think the Sharks know they've gotten a pool of good prospects, but I don't think they and players in general, I don't think they really know exactly what it is. I think they've done a good job of grabbing, youth and saying, hey, blah, 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 blah. But I think they're still figuring out exactly what pieces are those.
Sure, but I'm even talking about, like, to be clear, when I say he could put 2 very good lines on the ice, I mean with the roster he's been handed.
No. I understand. I understand, and I think the point I'm trying to make is he could certainly do that, and I don't disagree. If he rolls it out every night after night, though, at some point other teams are will have scouted that out and should, if they're smart, neutralize it. So what he may be doing, and I'm not defending him here, there's just general logic, right? Is he may be doing that on certain nights and then going, I don't want everyone to catch on exactly to what this is, and so now I'm going to mix it up here a little bit, and hopefully by this point I'll be able to find some other chemistry, because as a coach, as you are going night to night for 82, I always forget how many games are on the initial season, but
82, yeah,
82, like what doesn't work is playing the same strategy and the same thing night after night after night. Now, you could do it until the wheels fall off, and then mix it. No, Cooper mixes up his lines occasionally too.
Oh, like, but he tactically deploys all the time, but they use the same.
Oh, listen. I'm not saying Warshawski's on the same level as Cooper, and especially not at this point in time. I'm simply pointing out that while he could march out 2 excellent lines and two shit lines night after night after night, he may, I'm projecting here, he may have some concerns that if he does that, like let's say every day you have the NCAA line, that by about a month in, the NCAA line's been figured out.
Okay, so to that point though, then it's on the NCAA line or college line to
I agree. I know where you're going,
and to deploy new tactics, right? Like, that's his job. I'm not sure he's doing what you think he's doing, but if he is, he's playing 4D chess before he's figured out how to play 2D
Yes,
chess.
that's fair. Yeah. I'm just
right?
saying that. I'm just saying that's a possibility. I'm not saying I think that's what he's
I
doing.
don't
but
think
yeah.
he knows who's good and who's bad. I come back to, I think he's being fed information that some of these guys are really valuable, and they should be providing that value on those lines they're being put on.
And he's trying to make it work.
And he's wrong, and the organization is wrong. And I'd love to see them fucking figure it out.
So the most like doomsday thing I have on Warsofsky, like sort of came when I was watching the Minnesota game, especially the third period. I smelled McClellan in those line deployments in the third period. I'm just like, here is a coach desperate to lean on his stars no matter what to try to like pull this game back for a win. And like by the end of the game, you could tell Celebrini was gassed. Like he should not have been out there, or he should have been rested and then put out. And like I gotta want, like, I'm curious to see what happens.
Look, he's played a college season now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of the issue, right?
And it's like whenever I see a coach start to like grind up a like known factor like high performer, I just think of McClellan and Boyle and like how he basically destroyed Boyle in that one season when we desperately needed him in the playoffs. And I'm like, okay, is Warsofsky going to get his like stud demon that he trusts? He has Celebrini and maybe like, Toffoli again, or another winger that he trusts, Eklund. And is he just going to turn those people to ash in January, February if the team needs wins? And I have not loved the line deployments, and it's felt extra obvious over the last like month.
Yeah, I to build on that point, what worries me is exactly the idea that he's leaning on Celebrini, who has never played, more than 50 games in a season, right? Competitively speaking, maybe a little bit more with tournaments and shit like that, right? But
Yep.
His college season was 38 games, including the not just the regular season, but the playoffs. And now he's at 33 NHL games where he's been playing heavy minutes. This is the thing I think we talked about at the beginning of the season, where we were kind of happy to see, to some extent, not ecstatic, that they were trying to be very careful with these guys and give them off days, etc., very early. That seems to have gone out the window with Celebrini.
With Celebrini. But I think also Celebrini, the way he came out in the beginning, sort of proved that he was way more ready than I think maybe even they. I think they knew clearly Greer knew he was ready, because Greer kept talking about that. But I don't necessarily know that they thought he was going to be as advanced as he is. And again, to your point, Ben, that's not doesn't necessarily excuse it, because they could be misreading this now as we get deeper into the season. My only concern, my big concern with Celebrini came in the first preseason game that I was at, where he went into the boards and then he came back and played, and I was like, he needs to know, and the team needs to know that is not the time or the place to be doing that. If it were the playoffs, it would be something totally different. And I think, but there's been no indication that there's any issue with his durability. But then, that's where I do get the most nervous. But we got to switch gears here real quick. We did have a couple of games that went on in the last, we'll say January, basically the new year. So on Thursday, the Sharks beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. What a hell of a start to the year. In fact, actually, the Sharks were undefeated that first week of January, because then they would go on to beat the New Jersey Devils by a score of 3-2. So 2-1 against Tampa Bay, great team. 3-2 against the Devils, pretty good team. Then they lost to Vegas 4-2, but really let's say 3-2 there. And then they lost to a close one to Utah, who were very goony that game. And then they lost last night 3-1, although again, really I would say 2-1. That last goal was on a really unlucky watching in the
weird
tank,
goalie pull and everything.
Watching like Askarov was asking to be pulled and waving at the bench far earlier than they pulled him, and then by the time he pulled him, coincidentally, that's when turnover happened, and there was no way he was going to be able to get back. So bites, but that's kind of the way it goes. In general, though, the Sharks are doing a really good job of losing by 1 point, which I know sounds like a weird thing to say. I think they're like something like 19 games or something like that. So again, this is much better hockey and much more competitive hockey than we've seen in the last couple of years from them. So there is some improvement. Again, I think when you look at the guys who are slated to be UFAs and what's going to happen at the trade deadline, I have very high confidence that this team is going to be competing for a playoff spot in the next, like 2 seasons. I think if as long as they don't make stupid acquisitions, in free agency and clog stuff up, you can already see that this team, to me, has turned a corner. And I know that guys like Smith and Celebrini and Warsofsky have been like, no such thing as losing better. Losing just as sucks, but they are. So ignore those guys. Guys, before I get to the schedule, 3 stars of, well, since the last podcast, I guess you could say, not necessarily the week, what would you give it to? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Oh,
going way out into the woods. 3rd star, Mackenzie Blackwood. That
Fair.
motherfucker's goals against and save percentage since he went to Colorado is insane. He is everything that we were saying, and just it's so cool to watch him like succeed. I desperately hope we can somehow salvage Forgiev and like get like, I don't know, a 4th and a handshake for him or something. I just the fact that the Sharks has taken in a goalie like Blackwood, who everyone was sort of down on, and just turned him into this stud is fucking awesome. 2nd star is going to Eklund because, like, just goddamn, that guy does not get enough praise, and he is so good.
Fun to watch.
He has addressed every concern I had about him when he first showed up. It is awesome, and he just is having so much fun out there. I mean, when he's scoring and having good plays. And I mean, 1st star goes to Celebrini. I'll just fucking bolt that onto him for the rest of the season.
All right, I'm going to go next, Ben, if that's cool. So my 3rd star is going to go to, of course, the hockey stick beer. You had to know that was coming.
Hold on. I love that you were just like, if that's okay, and then right into it.
Right into yeah. I'm actually going to wait for you. My 2nd star is not a player. It is actually the combination of person or organization, and that is to Brody Brazil and the Sharks for pulling him in, because the content that he's doing on his YouTube page since he was let go from NBC has been great, regardless of the team that you root for. And the behind the scenes interviews that he's been giving already have given me a better sense of the culture in the locker room, and actually provided valuable information from players who typically don't really give you anything. So I think that was a real smart pickup when you look at what a lot of other teams do and the access they give. Sharks have really been behind on that, and I think pulling Brody in was the right call, both for him and for the organization. So I applaud both those. And then my number 1 star this area, I suppose, is actually Askarov.
Yep.
And that is because, look, he knows what the deal is. We know what the deal is. Vanacek goes out with an unfortunate, injury, and Askarov literally is doing everything that you hope he's going to do. Is he perfect? No, but is he really freaking good? And is his personality hilarious and amazing? And does it look like we have a star goalie in the future? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that has bummed me out the most as we sort of get further into this month is, knowing that he's going to need to be pushed back down to the AHL. Not because he'll have a problem with it. I'm not worried about that as much as some other fans are. Again, I think the organization has made it. He's very well aware of what is going on, and he's with it. And he even said so in his interview with Brody that, like, he loves it here. He's super happy to be here. He doesn't really have concerns and stuff like that. But I do think it is a little bit unfortunate that at the end of the day, the Blackwood trade happened so early, and we got Georgiev in return, because what that means is that between Georgiev and Vanacek, those guys are going to, when they're both healthy, dominate that goaltending spot in the NHL until another one gets moved, like in the trade deadline. And then we'll start to see the Askarov era come up. But he to me, like, I already know what Celebrini is, so it's actually going to be harder for him to earn my stars, I got to say. But again, I went from, if I get a new sweater, to Celebrini to, it's probably a Celebrini, but it could be an Askarov. and that's
Wow.
pretty good for a young goaltender.
Grading on a curve,
Askarov
just
is
like
going to
Morrissey.
give someone a heart attack. Like his goalie style reminds me, like it has this tiny little flavor of Hasek in it, and it's fun.
His
But oh
his
my
puck
He's got
god,
handling gives me a heart attack every time.
Well, yeah, but did you watch the Brody interview with him where he talks about why he does that?
I watched about the first half. I need to go back to it.
Yeah, so he basically said that when he was in Milwaukee, which is a word he cannot say, which is also awesome, that he did that once or twice, and all the players came up to him and were like, "Do that more. It really helps us. Like we love it." And then when we got a short shot on Nashville, it was the same deal. And then when he came here with the Sharks, guys were saying it to him. So the players are the ones that are encouraging him to do that because they think it gets play moving faster. But it is higher risk, so it's
yeah. It probably is good, and he seems to be good at judging when to do it and when to bail. It just every time is a nail biter.
Yeah, I think part of it is I think he's very good positionally and very quick and very athletic. But I've also noticed that he has no qualms about leaving his crease.
he staylocks a lot, but
he'll take the dog for a walk behind the net for a little while and linger there and come around. So Ben, your 3 stars.
My 3rd star is Shakir
Nice.
Mukmadulin. I think he's looked really fucking good at the NHL level.
I'll do a spin move. That works.
Oh, okay. I love it. Him and Eklund both love to do that spinner. Not just for the spinners, but he's very mobile for a guy who's 6'4". He's way more agile and deceptive in his movements than I expected. I mean, I like him. I think he's going to be real good at the NHL level. Is he, top pair guy? I don't know, but I don't care.
But I agree.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, once Dickinson here, he's probably the top pair guy with Wallman. But you
need 6 defensemen at least. So
it's encouraging because I know he's struggled a little bit post injury at the AHL level, but I think he's been great here. My 2nd star is Colin Graff for coming up, and he had 2 points in 3 games before they shoved him onto other lines to struggle. And
well, again, they probably thought he was more ready based off of those early plays. So misread.
Look, okay, I was going to hold on to this after the prior discussion, but look, each of these poor guys who has actual skill, who's being saddled with these, are ultimately going to end up being as bitter as Roger Murdoch in Airplane, who complains that if you had to drag Lambier and Walton up and down the court for 48 minutes, you'd have trouble too, basically. Because I'm sure that's how Smith feels.
Yeah,
it's like I've heard this shit since I was a rookie. Anyway, and my 1st star is Askarov. Everything Alex said is exactly how I feel. We have a clear, elite goalie for the future, and that's incredible.
Dude, we've got a handful of positions. When was the last time you could say this about the Sharks? We have a handful of positions that are locked for the future that are hard positions to get. We got a number 1 center very clearly. We've got a top level winger, at least one, clearly. We have a goaltender, an elite goaltender, which is very hard to get, and he's very young, and they're going to lock up these guys. My only concern, and that's not to rain in the parade, it's just something to be aware of, is I am so enthusiastic about some of the young pieces we have that I hope to God we manage the money because when you do have so many of these things coming online that look so good, guys like Sam Dickinson, who I'm really excited about, Sharks are going to hit a point where they get real expensive, and they're going to have to figure out how to juggle that cap. But to know now that we have a goaltender who you could bring up today, you can't fully, but you could skill wise, and to see. And the other thing too is, I hear fans say this, and I don't know how much I believe it, but I'm not going to deny it. The idea that the Sharks play a little better in front of Askarov. I think the young Sharks really want to succeed and really want each other to succeed. And so I think that's one of the reasons that the NCAA line, right, the Graff, Smith, Celebrini line works so well, is partially because they just seem to understand each other. but also because
They're all talented.
But I think part of it is they all drive each other. Like, and that's
Yes.
the thing, and that's the thing that I was saying at the beginning of the season with like Smith and Celebrini when Smith was struggling a little bit more was, hey, put him on Celebrini's wing. Those guys are competitive with each other. So like, if Celebrini, starts racking up the points on that line, you better believe Will Smith's gonna turn it on because he doesn't want to miss out on that, right? And so.
Also he's probably assisting on those points or benefiting with goals, right? Like,
but like right now, like when you put, and I think we saw this when you put Celebrini and Smith on the same line, and I'm just going to use those two again. This applies to anyone. They have something to prove and to prove together and individually, and so I think like Celebrini is like, oh no, I got Smith on my line. Sweet, we're going to show these guys what we can really do. And I think, again, going back to Askarov, that's what gets me so excited, is he really wants to show what he can do. And the players, when they play in front of him, seem to also really want to let him do that. So I think we're in a great position.
He's also having so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Askarov is hurdle 2.0 in personality in interviews, even down to the language. He's like, he starts his interview with Brody. Brody asks him, like why he wanted to be a goaltender, and he basically says, "I was normal once," and then here's such
a goalie response.
He's having fun, and I want to say one last just thing about that too, Ben, is there are so many fans right now that are so concerned. I see so much concern about Askarov like going back down. Askarov knows the deal, guys.
Yeah.
And if you watch interviews with him, he's happy. He's not pissed. This is not the situation he was in before where his pipeline was blocked and the team didn't really, have full confidence in him being the future. The Sharks have told him, hey, man, you're the future. Don't worry about it. And he's okay. He's happy. When it comes to Smith, the Sharks obviously have a very heavy dialogue with Smith and Celebrini. They're putting him in outside ice situations to succeed, giving him extra training where he needs to, putting him with Marleau, like all sorts of stuff. So like, I know it's really easy to look at some of these scenarios and go, gosh, you're probably destroying who they are as people or their confidence. But but there's a lot of that, Colin, going around. And I understand why a perception would be that. You're also dwelling on it way more than they probably are, and the team probably is, and they're probably having good conversations. So we have fun players, guys. It's a happy time, even with the struggles that they're going through. And I think we have a really bright future. And speaking of bright futures, let's look at the schedule as we come up for this next week. So on Monday, there is no game, but I will be back at the arena to go watch WWE Raw with my kids because they got super into that, and that's exciting. On Tuesday, the Sharks are in Detroit to play Detroit. On Thursday, they are in Columbus to play Columbus. And on Saturday, they are in New York to play New York Islanders. Who knows when we'll podcast next, so there'll probably be more games between now and that. We have seen the last of Vegas this season, which is always a little disappointing because, I like playing them. Where are the Sharks? Who's winning the bet, Alex or Colin? Well, right now it's swinging back in the direction of Colin, which I'm not complaining about. The Sharks are sitting at 31st out of 32 teams. Only the Blackhawks are below them, and the Blackhawks are somewhat catching up here because the Blackhawks are sitting at 30 points, 43 games played, and the Sharks are at 45 games played, and they're at 32 points. Just above them with 42 games played is 33. If you're wondering why the Sharks have so many more games played, it's because they always have like 20 back-to-backs for whatever stupid reason the schedulers decide. But basically, Sharks are in 32nd. The next leap up would be Buffalo with 37 points, and the pack is starting to separate. And this last sort of stretch where the Sharks sort of went 2-7-1, along with that, long losing streak they had before they kind of pulled through those 2 wins at the end of the year, have really sort of caused them to slide down. But there is a Celebrini effect. Don't you worry there, Colin. We will see. What happens.
We are 35% points percentage. Like,
have you guys?
We are drafting in the top 5.
We do have the worst goal differential, I think, at anyone. Right?
I'm going to bet on your bet. I'm going to put money on Colin winning the bet. So
Colin said top 5, so if it's not the top 5, I win.
Yeah, we're gonna
like I said, I'm betting on Colin winning this bet.
Yeah, I am at this point too, but you have to admit I had you guys go in there with how good Celebrini was pushing things. Right?
Like we'd have to have 3 players all basically be lights out, record-setting fucking finish of the season, and we'd still end up in the top 8.
I disagree. I actually, because the Sharks keep losing these games by 1 point, I think if you had a slightly better defense in there, even just slightly, I think some of these are wins for the Sharks. I don't think they're good, but like, you know, if you get Ferraro, Ruda, and CC out of there, and you who knows who you pull up or plug in or whatever. I don't think that's the thing with the Sharks here. Are the Sharks phenomenal? No. Is the difference between the elite team and the worst team that large of a gap? Not necessarily. And I think, you know, you get Smith clicking on and stuff starts to shift. You get defense being a bit tighter. And again, I think some of these are wins or at least overtime losses and stuff like that. So I don't.
Yeah, overtime losses might sink me. Like that's where my confidence drops.
The point is stupid. It's so stupid.
The loser point might hurt us again. But no, man, we are cruising comfortably exactly to where we want to be.
Here's
the thing with this draft's top 5. I'm okay with any of the prospects in that top 5.
You don't have to lay out the goal, Ben. We're accomplishing the goal. The goal was to be more competitive, develop, lose by less, and still get a top pick.
No. The goal is to finish third to last and snake the top pick anyway.
That would be delicious if we.
That's what I want to see. I want to see us
be lotteried up. That would be beautiful.
I want to see us all be sad that we didn't finish, dead last, but snake the first overall anyway, just to fucking double middle finger the rest of the league.
Top 5 of this draft, I'm okay with any of them.
Can I tell you something?
Sure.
Wherever the Sharks finish, I just don't want Blackhawks getting the first round pick. I don't want them to be able to match something up with Bedard. Like, if you look at the other guys who are floating back there, like, other than Philadelphia, none of those teams are really in the position where that pick is going to elevate to that same degree as having a pairing like we are trying to get with Smith and Celebrini. So as long as it's not Blackhawks, I'm good. And speaking of not Blackhawks, we're not the Blackhawks, which doesn't work. But listen, you can subscribe to our podcast on the Apple Podcast app, and you can rate us 5 stars or whatever stars you want. It doesn't really matter. We're still only going to post once a month these days. We're old now. Long gone are the weeklies where people knew who we were. And of course, Android people, you can figure it out, or you can probably check out Spotify. You can check us out on the web at circlingthecup.com. It's basically just our podcast archive. You can, and we have podcasts, 217 episodes, by the way. Not that anyone doubts it, but I know they're not all up for whatever reason. But you're not going to go back and listen to old Sharks podcasts. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, you can, Ben, do the socials now. I don't even know where they are anymore.
So I mean, Twitter is still the same. It's just Circling the Cup at twitter.com. On Blue Sky, where I'm starting to do more posting, I am benctc.bsky.social, and I no longer have a Facebook presence, so
I can't remember the login. So if you're trying to track us up on Facebook, whoops, sorry, we'll figure it out. Otherwise, guys, that concludes this month's podcast. I think we're on a monthly cadence at this point, but we'll figure it out. Do me a favor and say bye-bye so we can get off here.
Secret tank.
James Hagens is Boston College. I keep forgetting that. Greer's totally going for that guy.
Bye-bye. That is a good point, Colin. Thanks for listening, Alex. That was fun. Alex was with me at the game last night. That was a lot of fun, and he organized it. So he drove in from Sacramento with a couple of buddies, and I think we're going to make it an annual thing. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah, and he spent entirely too much making sure everyone had a good time by buying everyone commemorative pucks.
Nice.
Which don't do again, dude. I know how much those pucks are. We're all